What you reading?
Nothing.
Doesn't look like nothing. Looks like a comic book.
It's not a comic book, it's a graphic novel.
Ha! I knew it! You're reading a comic book. Bit lowbrow, isn't it?
No, this is by Alan Moore. I mean, he's the Orson Welles of comics, and besides, the graphic novel needs a lot more respect in our society. It's just, the stories told with pictures, it's a part of our heritage. I mean, it goes back to Egyptian hieroglyphs. You know what the first comic was? The Bayeux Tapestry. I mean, it's just, when you think about that heritage that we're ignoring, you haven't even read this, have you?
No, I haven't.
Well then.
I did watch the film version, though.
Oh god, that thing.
Say, how about we set our cultural differences aside and review the movie?
How did you do that?
The amount of DVDs I have, I've kind of resorted to Time Lord technology.
Well, as a great man once said, why the hell not? Welcome to Brows Beat Down.
Ah, yes, the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, a film which apparently not even the people who made it even liked.
It's based on the graphic novel by Alan Moore, and... can I take it from here?
Be my guest.
Gramercy. Alan Moore is one of the most famous and influential writers in comics, so much so that introducing him to a crowd of enthusiasts of pop culture esoterica seems almost redundant. He is a practicing occult magician, he worships an ancient Roman snake puppet, and his works may or may not have given fuel to the fire of the global Occupy movement. Like many of his more famous works like Watchmen and V for Vendetta, 1999's The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen riffed on the tropes of the superhero genre. The comic took the band of superheroes concept, popularized by the Justice League and the Avengers, and moved it back to the superheroes' literary ancestors, making a superhero league out of popular characters from Victorian literature. Like most ideas that Moore has, he took the premise and expanded it beyond its Victorian setting to the most insane yet strangely logical conclusions. It's a comic where Toad of Toad Hall was created by Dr. Moreau, where Charlie Chaplin started World War II, and Mr. Hyde brought down a Martian tripod. In short, it's my favorite comic ever. However, you can always expect Hollywood to take decent source material and to turn it into complete crap.
Especially when that studio is 20th Century Fox, who gave us such fine adaptations as X-Men Origins Wolverine, Elektra, and The Dark is Rising. 20th Century Fox, spurred on by their success with the X-Men movies, went looking for other comic book properties to turn into successful franchises. All the stars, bar one, were signed for 3-picture contracts, so they were clearly intending a hit. And in the lead there was Sean Connery, who after turning down the role of Gandalf in The Lord of the Rings for having not understood the script, decided to pick another script they didn't understand, presumably because it would be a hit. It had apparently not occurred to him that maybe he didn't understand it because it was crap and didn't make sense. Indeed, this guaranteed hit turned out to be anything but, as the production made headlines daily with news of production delays and that Sean Connery and director Stephen Norrington were fighting all the way through filming. In the end, not only was the movie a one-off flop, but it made Connery and Norrington both retire because they had lost their love of making movies, as well as ensuring Alan Moore would never put his name to any film adaptation of his work in the future. You do have to admire a film so bad that it made both its director and star retire.
And trust us when we say the end result looks just as bad as you would imagine. So our film begins at the turn of the 20th century, 1899 to be precise, where the opening text informs us that new weapons are just around the corner. One of these new weapons happens to be this tank, smashing through London, confusing these bobbies.
Halt! Halt!
You may not be familiar with what it is, but when I see a giant hunk of metal charging towards me, I get the hell out of the way.
See, this reminds me of something.
Halt! In the name of the law!
Ooh, nasty.
The name of the law is not gonna stop a bloody tank, you idiot. The tank then smashes into the Bank of England, which happens to be guarded by British Army soldiers? Okay.
The tank finally comes to a stop outside the vault, revealing that somehow the bad guys are Nazis. In 1899.
As you might have already guessed, this film delivers a giant middle finger to historical accuracy.
Historical accuracy? What about fictional accuracy?
What?
Well, in the League universe, everything has a fictional source, so the tank would have only worked if you could tie it back to a novel, play, film, whatever. Here they brought it in because they just watched Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. The mastermind behind this devious attack, the Phantom, steals Da Vinci's plans for Venice. Germany is blamed for the attack and they deny it, with the Phantom attacking them next.
Was wollen Sie?
The world, Herr Dreamer. I want the world.
The Phantom then steals some scientists and preempts the Hindenburg disaster by nearly 40 years by blowing up a bunch of blimps for no other reason than to show how nefarious he is. Not bad, considering that the room is full of hydrogen that should incinerate everyone in about a second. The two attacks bring the two countries to the brink of war. Enter Allan Quartermain of King Solomon's Mines. Boringly. In the comic, he's first shown rotting away in a Cairo opium den. Connery apparently didn't want to be shown like that, so here he's first seen in a bar in Kenya, hiding behind a double. British agent Sanderson Reed has come to find him and help before the World War.
A group of not at all shifty-looking men in trench coats arrive, carrying a suspicious briefcase and bumping off Quartermain's double.
They're indestructible!
He's only wearing armor, you moron. It's been around for some time.
Not to mention Quartermain already killed one by shooting him in the head. So you might be overreacting a little. Despite being equipped with automatic weaponry, these bad guys can't hit a 60-year-old man, who then proceeds to shoot, fight, and kill his assassins despite being twice their age. This is all clearly done to make sure that people know that Quartermain is a badass. In the comic, he's brought on more for show because of his old age, and in his opium-addicted state, he's really in no state to fight. The real leader, well, we'll get to that.
One of them tries getting away, leaving an obviously ticking bomb, but Quartermain is an expert sharpshooter and shoots his target from a great distance.
Did you mean to just wound him?
Obviously.
Thanks, stupid dubbed-in ADR line. I never would have guessed that he just wounded him so he could interrogate him. Which turns out to be completely pointless because he takes a cyanide capsule. He might as well have just killed him in the first place. The hotel and bar blows up in a poorly CGI'd explosion, with Quartermain barely showing any trace of remorse. Oh no! All my friends were horribly blown up! Oh, heck with it. I'll join your league, doodad.
So Quartermain travels to London, where he's taken to see M, played by Richard Roxburgh, whose name is a cute touch considering Connery's presence.
What you call cute, I call lame, especially his overly theatrical turning on light bulbs introduction.
Well, it's a better entrance than Captain Nemo, at least. He just walks on as if to say, "Yep, I'm Nemo. What up?" A far cry from his entrance in the comic. Rushing in upon the Nautilus and firing a harpoon gun into the chest of a mad Arab.
Kyle, I know you like the comic, but you're really scaring me right now.
Sorry.
Nations are striking at nations, every attack marked by the use of highly advanced weaponry. They've discovered these attacks are all the work of one man, who calls himself the Phantom.
Very operatic.
Lame! We need to stop referencing Phantom of the Opera.
The Phantom is planning to attack the world leaders at a meeting in Venice in 4 days, so a team must be assembled, led by Quartermain, to stop him. Quartermain meets his fellow members, including Mina Harker from Dracula,
And Rodney Skinner, an Invisible Man, as opposed to the Invisible Man from Wells' story for copyright reasons, making a point that Wells Griffin died in the novel. Of course, the same thing happened to both Nemo and Quartermain in their respective novels, so who's complaining?
so they ride in an automobile because it's the future, get it? I don't think the movie is being subtle enough on that point. Anyway, enter Dorian Gray, played by Stuart Townsend, who apparently had a thing with Mina.
He's one of the characters added to the League for the movie. He's only here because he's a well-known character and people know that he can't die and there's a painting or something.
After some exposition masquerading as dialogue, the group are surrounded by men with guns as panto villain the Phantom enters, offering them the chance to turn evil, instead of, you know, killing them.
He's scarred, apparently, and that's why he looks like a Klingon. A masked good guy gunman sneaks in and starts an action scene solely because we need an action beat.
Amidst this poorly edited and jumbled action scene, Quartermain and the gunman both shoot at and barely miss the Phantom several times, until he dives out a window with his tail tucked between his legs. Yes, this walking cliche who nearly got defeated in the first act is meant to be intimidating. He barely nearly terrify a bingo hall.
We also discover at this point that Mina is a vampire. This does not make the character better. In the comic, she's brought on because she was supposed to be the glue that held them all together, and despite having no powers, she had the fearlessness of a true leader because she had faced the horror that was Dracula, and survived.
The movie misses the point entirely, all to stroke Connery's ego.
Okay, you alright? You sure you don't need a breather?
I'm fine.
Okay, just checking. So we learn that the gunman who helped them out is none other than Tom Sawyer, played by Shane West.
Oh no.
Oh look, another character they added solely for the movie because we need an American in this movie because Americans won't watch a movie unless they add an American Oh my god, I've become a fanboy.
No kidding, the nerd rage levels, they're off the charts! Are you sure you want me to take over for a little bit? I mean, excessive nerd rage is bad for the blood pressure.
You're probably right. But if they're including Tom Sawyer in this movie, it is their moral duty to include a fence painting joke.
They still have one more member to pick up, and they need to travel to Paris. Nemo has their transportation.
A boat?
It travels on water, if that's what you mean. And beneath it. Behold, Nautilus, the sword of the ocean.
Okay, when it was described as the sword of the sea, I don't think they meant it literally. I mean, how does that thing stay upright, let alone afloat? It's so big and long, I bet it can't turn for shit.
Besides, design-wise, it's nothing more than an ordinary cruise liner. The design Kevin O'Neill used involved a squid attacking a whale, which is certainly much more interesting and more visually creative than this thing.
In Paris, Quartermain and Sawyer are both chasing after Mr. Hyde, played by Jason Flemyng, in a scene that's so incredibly reminiscent of the following year's Van Helsing that I keep expecting Hugh Jackman to run in. Remember, Richard Roxburgh was in Van Helsing as Dracula, which only adds to the deja vu I'm feeling right now. They corner the beast and manage to somehow get it to land in an incredibly conveniently placed net, allowing them to drag it on board.
Somehow they got the Nautilus up the Seine. Don't ask me how.
So Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde will be granted amnesty for his crimes in London if he joins the League, and he accepts. So the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen has been set, or LXG for short.
Shouldn't the acronym be LEG?
Shh, the X makes it sound cooler. And now it's off to Venice. I never get tired of seeing the Nautilus. I don't know which is worse, the terrible CGI or the colossally stupid design in itself. It's hilarious. And speaking of hilarious...
Skinner, I want you dressed at all times.
Sean Connery. Mime.
So there's a lot of farting around on the Nautilus where there's supposed character scenes, including a lengthy bit where Quartermain takes Sawyer under his wing like a son and teaches him to shoot properly, like an Englishman.
What these scenes are is just dulled.
I'm watching the movie. To add the tiniest hint of spice to this tedium, there's a potential traitor on board, and there's a lot of scenes of the League being suspicious of each other, much of it falling onto Skinner. Not a very good team, are they?
Mina, who is a chemist in the film for plot convenience, speaks to Dorian, who explains his portrait.
Do you recall a space on the wall of my home? A picture was missing. Although the picture is my portrait, I doubt you'd recognize the face upon it. Every year that passes, my portrait ages instead of me.
When did you last see it?
I dare not look upon it myself. The magic of the painting would be undone.
You know, Dorian Gray actually looked at the painting. In fact, a lot of his most emotional scenes were spent looking at the painting.
You know, I get the impression the writer hasn't even bothered to Wikipedia the source novels, let alone actually read them.
They arrive and, oh, really, movie? How can they get the Nautilus in the Venetian canals?
It's like trying to fit a camel through the eye of a needle. It's almost as tall as the buildings, for crying out loud. The Phantom's plan is to position loads and loads of incredibly implausible gunpowder barrels under Venice's foundations, which would send the whole city crashing into the water. How did they rig that many barrels of gunpowder underwater without anyone noticing?
How will gunpowder work underwater?
But it does, and they've arrived too late, and part of Venice starts collapsing.
The bombs are at the city center. We must stake out one key building. Get ahead of the collapse and destroy the next building.
We can interrupt the chain of destruction.
With a beacon placed for the exact coordinates, I could launch a rocket and take out the domino.
Well, that's ridiculous.
They're going to stop the buildings from blowing up by blowing up a building.
Action movie logic! So in a sequence that defies logic, Quartermain, Sawyer, Mina and Dorian race around Venice in a car, roadless fucking Venice, outrunning the explosion while snipers, who in no way could possibly be there, shoot at them. Did the Phantom just position loads and loads of snipers around Venice on the off chance the League might go down there? How do you make an action scene this bloody stupid?
Quite simple, my colleague. The movie makers think you're an idiot.
Dorian hops out of the car to inexplicably fight the soldiers, whilst Mina...
Save your bullets, these men are mine!
Mina Harker is Vampirella.
More like Elvira.
What's the difference?
She turns into a bunch of bats and takes out the snipers on the roof.
Quartermain spots the Phantom, who apparently hasn't gotten the hell out of there on his sub for some reason, and jumps out to chase after him. There doesn't appear to be much of Venice left to save considering, but Sawyer launches the flare for Nemo's rocket to somehow stop the explosion, nearly blowing himself up in the process.
Venice still stands.
Not really, half of it just ended up in the bloody ocean.
Did the special effects department just not tell him that? Were they trying to embarrass him on purpose?
Quartermain chases the Phantom to a graveyard, another thing that's probably unlikely in the middle of Venice.
Hell, those caskets are either going to be bobbing up and down in the water or just plain sinking.
The pair fight and Quartermain knocks off the Phantom's mask to reveal that he's actually M. What? So he hired and created this team to stop himself?
No, it makes sense. I mean, he had to go back to his place to put on the costume and makeup to go back to Gray's place and meet them there. Yeah, this doesn't make sense.
It turns out that Dorian is in fact the traitor, shooting second mate Ishmael from Moby Dick. Ishmael, despite being shot, surprisingly has the ability to climb up and tell the others before he expires. And as if there wasn't enough parts of the Nautilus that look ridiculous, Dorian escapes using a stunningly poor-looking CGI spinning wheel thing that is apparently Nemo's exploration pod. How does that even stay afloat like that?
We can track it. I intend to catch it!
Just fucking shoot it! They exit Venice, presumably damaging it further with their chunky-ass ship, chasing after Dorian in the pod. They find a record left by Em and Dorian. It turns out that the League was merely a ruse so that Dorian could steal parts of them to create the ultimate super weapon.
You see, I want you, each of you, even tired old Quartermain, because he'll capture Hyde where all others have failed.
Then why did you try to kill him in Kenya? This doesn't make any sense!
Not to mention the vinyl record didn't exist then. And if he did make a sound recording of himself, it wouldn't sound nearly as good as what we're hearing here. I mean, this is just ignorant, convenient, and, stupid.
Just to make the scene even stupider, it turns out the record had a second high-frequency recording playing underneath that only Hyde could hear, and sets off, you guessed it, more bombs littered through the ship, even though they're nowhere near where the record was playing. Alarmingly fake CGI water rushes in as the League do their best Star Trek impressions.
The Nautilus needs to surface, but it's taking on so much water that it can't. Luckily, Jekyll comes to the rescue, transforming into Hyde because Hyde can breathe underwater. He opens the closed valves, letting the water out and allowing the ship to surface. Wait.
How did Jekyll know that Hyde can't drown? And how does Hyde know which levers to pull that will save the ship?
Ralph, the movie's given up already. It's sinking in a vat of raw sewage.
The Ralph thing stopped being funny months ago.
Luckily, by stunning plot contrivance, Skinner has snuck aboard the pod and gives Morse code to the Nautilus, letting them know of Dorian and M's location. After some repairs, they go full ahead to Skinner's coordinates, which leads them to Mongolia.
Looking at that map, I doubt it's smooth sailing. They find M's hideout where they wait to meet with Skinner.
I've been waiting a week to do that.
Report!
Well, hello to you too. And need I remind you, I am naked in the snow. I can't feel any of my extremities, and I mean any of them.
I really didn't need to hear about his frozen knob, thanks.
He seems chipper, for a man about to drop dead of extreme exposure.
In his fortress, M has been preparing weapons for the war he's about to profit from, using his private army and the kidnapped scientists. If this plot sounds familiar, it was reused for the second Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock Holmes.
Meanwhile, M and Dorian are busy being evil.
Your painting's in your room.
In return for the League. That was our deal, and I'm glad to see you honor it.
Putting aside the fact this isn't how Dorian Gray's painting works, if I had a magic painting of myself that could kill me if I looked at it, I think I would make sure it was as far away from me as possible, not actively trying to get it back.
The League bust into M's compound and have a completely unearned Fantastic Four moment before splitting up.
Skinner uses his invisibility to sneak around the base undetected, planting explosives.
Nemo frees the scientists and their families whilst Hyde assists and Sawyer and Quartermain go after M.
Do not move, Em. Or would you prefer Professor James Moriarty?
How does he know that?
Well, one of the henchmen in the Grey shootout earlier called him James, but besides that there's been no hints whatsoever, so obviously Quartermain is Sherlock Holmes whilst he's at it. However, a CGI soldier, yes, really, it's replacing someone cut out of the movie, suddenly attacks Sawyer, allowing Moriarty to escape. Meanwhile, Mina goes after her ex, Dorian, in another fight scene where he seems to get the upper hand.
Painting.
I hoped I'd get to nail you one more time. Didn't think it'd be literally.
Oh.
Not exactly Wildian wit, to be certain. Sounds more like a bad porno.
It turns out she's merely playing dead as she uses his sword to pin him against a wall and show him some photoshopped crap, which makes Dorian promptly, rapidly age and die.
No, Dorian Gray died when the painting was destroyed.
And not to nitpick, but that painting is far too big for the missing spot on the staircase earlier. Nice continuity, guys! As Quartermain and Sawyer chase after Moriarty, Sawyer is attacked by one of Moriarty's men who is invisible. That's right, he's having a riveting fight scene against someone we can't see.
Quick! Paint a fence at him!
I'd like to think he's having a fight with the special effects department, considering how shit they are. The invisible attacker escapes when suddenly Sawyer is attacked by the flamethrower guy from Lethal Weapon 4 when Skinner shows up and helps Sawyer defeat him. Boy, all these invisible people running around is really quite confusing.
Skinner's badly burned and the invisible baddie sneaks up and captures Sawyer. Elsewhere, Hyde meets his match.
No! Not the whole thing.
I think you'll find that most of that went over his face.
So the henchman turns into this refugee from an Xbox game who promptly beats the crap out of Hyde.
At least it kind of looks a bit more like Hyde did in the graphic novel.
Well, he certainly took that well, considering his spine should have been shattered by the impact. Obviously, Nemo has a bum made out of steel. Quartermain catches up to Moriarty and they fight for a bit, with Quartermain about to finish off his foe with an axe. At the same time, Hyde has changed back into Jekyll and he and Nemo are cornered by the monster. This is exactly when Skinner's bombs detonate, ripping the hideout apart. And I know it seems like we're being repetitive about the effects, but the monster being crushed looks horrendous.
Oh, well, it's not like they had a $78 million budget and ILM doing the effects.
They did.
Oh, well then harp all you like.
Moriarty reveals to Quartermain that Sawyer's been captured, forcing him to turn around and shoot the invisible bad guy. This in turn gives Moriarty the opportunity to fatally stab Quartermain in the back and make his escape.
What is he, frickin' Batman?
Wait, isn't that my line?
Sawyer grabs a rifle and takes aim at Moriarty, who's got a fairly impressive foot speed considering that he ran that distance in about 30 seconds. Sawyer waits the right moment before somewhat anticlimactically shooting Moriarty in the back, killing him. See, that boring training scene earlier was important. Unfortunately, Quartermain is dying.
May this new century
be your son, as the old one was mine.
You're the man now, dog.
No! They bury their leader in Africa, which earlier in the film he claimed was the country that wouldn't let him die. The League walk off together for a further adventure in a new century. But this is too downbeat a closing note, so...
This ending is just shameless sequel bait.
And pointless too, because if the behind the scenes fighting didn't make it abundantly clear there wasn't going to be a sequel, then the poor reviews and box office certainly did. The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen is a gigantic missed opportunity. What could have been a fun adventure, something akin to The Mummy meets X-Men, is seriously botched by a hideously poor script that is almost entirely made up of plot holes and implausibilities. This is a movie that actively seems to think that its audience is stupid. Worse still, the acting is incredibly poor from nearly everyone except Jason Flemyng, who does a decent job as Jekyll and Hyde. Probably the worst part of the film are the jaw-dropping bad special effects that would have been downright appalling in 2003 and are simply dire in 2012. If this is to be Connery's final live-action film, it's a sad way for a legendary actor to go out.
They took my favorite comic and they made it boring. They took a really playful and interesting idea and they just made it bland. Everything's gray. This movie's the color of baby shit. They not only don't seem to get the original stories that the characters come from, but they also miss the spirit of Moore's graphic novel. Moore's work is far more intelligent than this piece of crap suggests, and it's a shame that this film was a blot on his good name. Worse still, Connery seems bad-tempered, like he doesn't even care, and you can tell his thoughts were clearly on those of retirement than a franchise.
I'm Matthew Buck, beating down bad movies everywhere.
And I'm Cal Calgren, keeping brows held high everywhere. Here, educate yourself.